The NFL is a league filled with some of the greatest talent on the planet and some of the brightest minds in all of football. But even the best in the world get it wrong sometimes. Some NFL teams have traded away franchise players for peanuts in return, but other times some franchises have traded away players right before that they would do something that you would actually need to see to believe. Over the past decade, NFL franchises have made some laughable mistakes. But wait until you see how one franchise single-handedly propelled another franchise to Super Bowl glory. Before we get to the content, I am giving away $500 to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel, and another $500 to someone that follows us on Instagram. Now that we got all that out of the way, break! Following quarterback Teddy Bridgewater tearing his ACL in practice shortly before the 2016 NFL season began, the Minnesota Vikings made the desperate move of trading their 2017 first-round pick and fourth-round pick to the Philadelphia Eagles in exchange for quarterback Sam Bradford. The goal for this trade was to keep the Minnesota Vikings' playoff chances alive and hopefully replace the production of Teddy Bridgewater, if not increase it. Sam Bradford would actually go on to have a decent year and throw for a league-leading 71% completion percentage. However, the following season he wouldn't retain his job and got cut just 2 seasons after he was traded for. The Minnesota Vikings had given up a first-round pick for a quarterback who started just 17 games as a Viking. With that first-round pick, the Philadelphia Eagles drafted Derek Barnett, who has been a consistent contributor off the edge for the Philadelphia Eagles and even helped them win a Super Bowl in 2017. The Vikings made the right trade to get their guy playing in February. It was just for another team. Before the start of the 2011 NFL season, the Chicago Bears traded 26-year-old tight end Greg Olsen to the Carolina Panthers in exchange for a 2012 third-round pick. The Bears simply made this trade to get rid of an expiring contract and to get some sort of value for it. The only thing the Bears never took into account was Greg Olsen developing into one of the best tight ends of the 2010s. As a Panther, Greg Olsen would make 3 Pro Bowls, catch for over 6,400 passing yards and nearly 40 touchdowns, as he helped lead the team to the Super Bowl in 2015, but they would fall just short to the Peyton Manning-led Broncos 24-10. Greg Olsen retired in 2020 at age 35 with the 7th most receiving yards all time by a tight end, but will be most remembered for his leadership in the locker room. Do you think that the 7th most receiving yards all time for a tight end is what the Bears had in mind for Greg Olsen when they mindlessly shipped off Olsen in 2011 for just a third-round pick? Following trading away Olsen, the Bears would struggle to find a consistent tight end on the roster, usually finding a new guy to fill the position every few seasons. This trade may have seemed desperate, but not as clueless as the next trade. After David Gettleman signed Odell Beckham Jr. to a 5-year, $90 million contract and publicly told the media that
we didn't sign him to trade him, that's what you're asking me.
David Gettleman proceeded to trade Odell Beckham Jr. to the Cleveland Browns, along with edge rusher Olivier Vernon, for safety Jabril Peppers, a first-round pick, and a third-round pick. After being traded to the Browns, Odell would just have one 1,000-yard receiving season, catching just 7 touchdowns in 3 seasons with the Browns. You can argue that Odell was overrated to begin with, or that Baker Mayfield wasn't targeting him. It honestly doesn't really matter. Because what does matter is that Odell Beckham Jr. simply wasn't the player that he was on the New York Giants. Odell would last just 3 seasons with the Browns before being released midway through the 2021 season, and as of week 14 in 2021, Olivier Vernon and Odell Beckham Jr. are no longer on the Browns. For the Giants, the team predicted to lose the trade. Jabril Peppers has been a solid addition to their secondary, and in the 2019 NFL Draft, they drafted Dexter Lawrence with the Browns' first-round pick. And Lawrence has been a solid big body on a young developing defensive line. The most surprising part of this whole trade is that it makes David Gettleman look smart on the end of it. And that's almost surprising considering how the next player's career turned out. Midway through the 2010 NFL season, after being replaced by Fred Jackson as the starting running back of the Buffalo Bills a year prior, Marshawn Lynch was traded to the Seattle Seahawks for just a 4th and a 5th round pick. That's right, the Seattle Seahawks got one of the most dominant and entertaining running backs of the past generation for just 2 late-round draft picks. Marshawn Lynch had a few thousand-yard seasons already with the Buffalo Bills. However, after being suspended in the 2009 NFL season for having a gun in his home state of California, he fell out of favor with the Buffalo Bills front office, and getting rid of the talent was seen more as the goal, rather than getting proper compensation for his talent. As a Seahawk, Lynch would go on to rush for over 6,000 yards and score 58 touchdowns while making 4 Pro Bowls and being a key part of winning the Super Bowl in the 2013 NFL season. Over the years in Seattle, Lynch was able to grow his legacy and the nickname of Beast Mode by running through defenders, all while Fred Jackson was struggling to get 1,000 total yards for the Bills back in Buffalo. Lynch would go on to be named to the Hall of Fame All-2010s team, and when you look back at how little compensation the Bills got in return for an all-time great, it becomes apparent just how badly the Seahawks truly fleeced the Bills back in 2010. It was truly an unexpected trade, but it wasn't as unexpected as the next trade on this list. These trades just keep getting worse and worse as we progress, man. Wait until you see number 1, but number 6 literally crippled a man's career because Trent Richardson was the 3rd overall pick in the 2012 NFL Draft and was selected by the Cleveland Browns in order to add newfound explosiveness to their backfield. Richardson performed decently his rookie year, posting just over 1,300 scrimmage yards and 12 total touchdowns in his first campaign. But shortly into his second season, he was suddenly traded to the running back needy Indianapolis Colts for their 2014 first-round pick. The Colts had just had running back Vic Ballard go down to a season-ending injury and needed someone in the backfield to help second-year quarterback Andrew Luck make a playoff push. Despite Richardson being more of a liability whenever he touched the ball, the Colts still managed to go 11-5 both seasons Richardson was on the roster. In both seasons, he had just under 1,000 total yards and just 7 combined touchdowns. After the 2014 season, Richardson would never be on an NFL roster again. The Colts gave up a first-round pick for the former number 3 overall pick, and he didn't even last 3 seasons on their team. I promise you somehow these trades get worse. During the end of the 2018 NFL season, receiver Antonio Brown caused quite a stir in the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room, missing multiple practices and eventually being benched for Week 17. Following the season, Brown made his dissatisfaction with the team even more clear, as he publicly requested a trade, and once one was agreement with the Buffalo Bills, he publicly detested the trade, instead eventually being traded to the Raiders. The Steelers would give up Antonio Brown for just a 3rd-round pick and a 5th-round pick from the Raiders, and at the time, the low price tag for what was a future Hall of Fame wide receiver seemed very odd. But we'd soon find out shortly after why that was. Before even playing a snap for the Las Vegas Raiders, Brown would miss 10 training camp sessions with the Raiders due to having frostbite on his feet from misusing a cryotherapy chamber, and then missed multiple practices before the season even began, because the NFL had to ban Antonio Brown's helmet for safety reasons. He would get a sponsorship from a helmet company, which would revoke their sponsorship like 2 weeks later, and the beauty of this was it was all captured on Hard Knocks, because the Raiders were the team on HBO's Hard Knocks that year. And I'm telling you, I think it's probably one of the best Hard Knocks we've ever got. It's John Gruden, Antonio Brown. It's hysterical to watch if you're a football fan. Even after all this, Brown went on to have a screaming match with general manager Mike Mayock and even threatened to hit him. A few days later, Antonio Brown was released from the Raiders, thus ending his career with them before it even started. The Raiders traded away a few decent draft picks for a media nightmare. That's a new level of bad only John Gruden could possibly accomplish, but to be honest, this isn't even the worst John Gruden related trade on this list. In the 2016 NFL Draft, the LA Rams thought they had surely found a franchise quarterback that would lead them for years to come, as they traded 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and 2 third-round picks all to the Tennessee Titans for the number 1 overall selection used to draft Jared Goff, and a few other late-round draft picks, which is really ironic because they were literally on the receiving end of fleecing another team in the NFL Draft, which we're going to get to later on in this list.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
Now, Jared Goff would go on to play 5 seasons with the Rams, highlighted by a 4-year contract worth $134 million and a Super Bowl run with the team that ultimately fell short in 2018. After the shortcomings of the team ultimately being blamed on the limited ability and talent of Jared Goff, he was shipped out to the Detroit Lions when they were just 2 seasons into his new contract in favor of the gunslinging Matthew Stafford, thus ending the Jared Goff experiment for the Rams. However, for the Tennessee Titans, this trade literally propelled them as one of the middle teams in the NFL to one of the most dominant teams in the NFL, because they were able to draft players like Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, and of course, Derrick Henry, possibly the most dominant running back in the NFL. Henry was picked 44 selections after Jared Goff and won the 2020 Offensive Player of the Year award as he ran for just over 2,000 yards and 17 touchdowns, both NFL bests. Going into 2021, Henry signed a 4-year, $50 million team-friendly contract to try and help lead the Titans back to the playoffs. This is definitely one of the most lopsided trades in NFL history, let alone this decade, but there are still a few more trades on this list as we're finally getting into the top 3, and these are some really bad trades. Before the start of the 2020 season, the New York Jets had picked up the 5th-year option on safety Jamal Adams, but Adams made it clear before the start of the season that he was unwilling to play the season under the 5th-year option and wanted a contract extension instead. After requesting a trade, Adams would say he didn't feel like Adam Gase was the right leader for the organization going forward, and just a day after that bold proclamation, he would get traded to the Seattle Seahawks on July 25th, 2020. The Seahawks would give up their 2021 and 2022 first-round draft picks, as well as safety Bradley McDougald and another 2021 third-round pick. In exchange, the Jets gave up safety Jamal Adams and a future 4th-rounder. But since the trade, Adams hasn't been much of a typical safety, more so playing like a versatile linebacker who can rush the passer on the outside or stop the run up the middle, but is an extreme liability when it comes to coverage. In Adams' first year with Seattle, he had 9.5 sacks. However, he still lacked when it came to coverage. Despite this, Adams signed a 4-year contract worth up to $72 million with incentives and $38 million guaranteed. Jamal Adams was brought in to help fix a struggling defense that hasn't had much of an identity since the Legion of Boom. But since Jamal Adams' arrival, the defense finished 22nd in yards in 2020 and is dead last in yards in the NFL thus far. Since the trade, the Jets have helped use their draft capital to trade up and select USC guard Elijah Vera Tucker, who has played decent in his rookie year in his job to protect a variety of quarterbacks. It's a pretty safe bet to say that the Seattle Seahawks overpaid for Adams on this trade and then proceeded to overpay him again literally. At least the Jets can try and rebuild with the pieces now, but they'll probably find a way to mess it up. But not as badly as these next 2 teams, because number 2 is Khalil Mack. Right before the start of the 2018 NFL season, after an offseason of holding out for the largest outside linebacker contract in the NFL, Khalil Mack finally got his wish. Just not in Oakland, as he was traded to the Chicago Bears and signed a 6-year, $141 million contract. He was traded along with a 2nd-round pick in exchange for the next 2 years' first-round picks and a 2020 3rd-round pick. The players the Raiders got out of the trade were ultimately Josh Jacobs, Damon Arnett, and Bryan Edwards. However, Damon Arnett would be cut in 2021 following a personal situation where he literally posted a video with him with a gun onto social media threatening another individual, a topic that we have multiple videos on if you want to check that out after this. But before this trade even happened, you might be asking yourself, why didn't the Raiders give the 2016 Defensive Player of the Year and a franchise cornerstone the money he wanted? Well, because of John Gruden, the team's new head coach, just didn't want to sign Mack to a contract. He said that had they extended Mack, the Raiders wouldn't have been able to sign tackle Trent Brown, receiver Antonio Brown, defensive back LaMarcus Joyner, linebacker Vontaze Burfict, or receiver Tyrell Williams. None of those players are on the 2021 Raiders. But since Mack's arrival in Chicago, he's made the Pro Bowl in every season, and in just 3 seasons has forced an astonishing 14 fumbles. And now 4 seasons with Chicago, Mack has 36 sacks in just 1 season with double-digit sacks. But don't be fooled by the stats on paper, as Mack consistently finishes amongst the top most double-teamed edge rushers in the NFL every season. Mack is on pace to be one of the best players of our generation, as he was already named to the Hall of Fame All-2010s team, and when it's all said and done, could have a gold jacket on. If you thought number 2 was bad, I'm sure we all know what number 1 is. Take a moment and go to the comment section to guess. I'll give you a few seconds. Because number 1 is none other but DeAndre Hopkins. On March 22nd, 2020, the Houston Texans traded the best wide receiver in the NFL, DeAndre Hopkins, along with a 4th-round pick to the Arizona Cardinals in exchange for running back David Johnson, a 2020 second-round draft pick, and a 2021 4th-round draft pick. Even at the time, analysts were saying that this may have been one of the most one-sided trades in NFL history, but even as time goes by, it gets even worse. Bill O'Brien, the man who made the trade for the Texans, was shortly fired midway throughout the 2020 campaign, and David Johnson is the only viable player the Texans got in the trade. He has barely over 1,000 yards from scrimmage for the Texans in his 2 years playing for the team. DeAndre Hopkins, however, picked up where he left off with the Texans, as in his debut season with Arizona, he put up just over 1,400 yards receiving and made the Pro Bowl. The Cardinals in 2021 have the best record in the NFC, and although Hopkins may have been slightly injured during the year's campaign, he still managed to catch 8 touchdowns in just 9 games. The Cardinals fleeced the Texans in this trade objectively and now have one of the best quarterback-wide receiver combinations in the NFL. As the Texans are wondering who will even play quarterback or wide receiver for them next season. Let us know what you guys think about these trades in the comment section down below. Did we miss a trade in particular? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.